Three very interesting prospects that could interest the San Francisco 49ers at various points in the NFL draft. Will they be there, and are they a fit for the San Francisco 49ers when they are on the clock? Troy Fautanu, Max Melton, and Johnny Newton coming at you right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock, at Eric_Crocker, or Crocky209, or Croc Time U, depending on where you find him on the various socials. Appreciate everybody in there in the chat right now and joining us as you do every single day. All the everydayers out there, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. And today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on. All right, Croc. Love seeing the folks in the chat. Love seeing more and more prospects. I've got draft fever, Croc. I'm looking at prospects all day long, every day. I'm not even watching basketball tournaments. I'm watching tape. Instead, I'm grinding right now, Croc, and I know you've been grinding as well. And we did an interesting mock draft to end the week last week, and we did the old Brandon Ayuk trade scenario. And I do want to remind everybody, we're not trying to force Brandon Ayuk out the door. We're just going with rumors, playing with scenarios, and you got to know what it would be like if you did trade him and how that might look to inform yourself if you should trade him or if you should not. And we did the Steelers trade right at pick number 20. We ended up with Troy Fautanu, offensive lineman out of Washington, a left tackle for the Washington Huskies. Let's start with him, Croc. Now we've done a deeper dive on Fautanu. A lot of people really like him. How did you feel about Fautanu? The big question with him, does he stick at left tackle in the NFL as he played in college?
All right, so let's go to the handy-dandy notes that I have here. And right away, with all these prospects, you typically want to go to some of the best opponents that they'll play. So, early on when I went to go watch Max Melton, cornerback, it's like, oh, they played against Ohio State. Let me go watch him against Marvin Harrison Jr., right? So when it came to Fautanu, I'm like, wait a minute, Washington, they played a really good team late in the year, right? Oh, man, they went up against Michigan for the championship. All right, let's go and watch that game. And from what I just remember watching it live, again, evaluating prospects and watching a player live, totally different things. I just remember Michigan just kind of really manhandling the offensive line in Washington. So you go back and you want to see, like, whoa, how did he look in this game? And I thought he looked sweet. Matter of fact, I watched that game and I watched the other playoff game against Texas, and being able to kind of watch those back to back, I think he performed extremely well on both of them. Some of the things that really stood out right away, has a good anchor. It's interesting watching. I thought his pass set looked a lot better consistently against Michigan as opposed to Texas. And that's not to say that it looked bad against Texas. First, Texas looked like he was playing more like basketball. You didn't see that just kick step, kick slide that offensive tackles do. It was just kind of more like, let me just shuffle and get in position to get in front of the pass rusher that I may be going against. But really good anchor. I thought that he handled speed and power well, or speed to power. That's one of the things that you really want to see. Like, how does a tackle or in the offensive line handle speed to power? Which, some guys, they'll come at you, they want to bend around the corner. We saw Von Miller do that a lot. Von Miller would beat guys so much around the edge. Sometimes he kind of act like he's going to try to beat you with speed, then come with that power and that stab and try to knock a guy back into the quarterback's lap. I thought Fautanu handled that extremely well. I thought he was quicker than explosive. When you watched him in like open field kind of running, it was kind of like one speed and not very fast. But if you watched him just how well he moved laterally in a box, I thought he did terrific. So I'll kind of like I have some more notes on him, of course, but I'll let you kind of talk about some of the things that you saw from him, and then we can bounce some thoughts back and forth.
I saw nearly identically exactly all the things you just talked about, Croc. And the first thing that stood out to me is how just easy he moves around. And to be honest with you, that's not the first thing. The first thing I noticed is his jersey riding up and showing his belly. And I don't know if that's a feature or a bug for Troy Fautanu. So my short version scouting report on Fautanu was Joe Looney wearing Zeke Elliott's jersey at practice. Do you remember when he did that? And because Zeke Elliott always shows off the abs at practice, at Cowboys practice, and former 49er Joe Looney one time at practice went out to practice wearing Zeke Elliott's jersey, showing off his boiler. And obviously he's an offensive lineman, so very different aesthetic there. And that's what Fautanu ends up looking like. And I don't think he plans it that way, but he's just built in a way where his jersey starts to ride up and his belly's kind of sticking out a little bit there, which, to be honest with you, aesthetically, I love it. He's an offensive lineman.
Sweet. The drip on point. He's a part of Croc's all swag team for sure.
I love that. But he's built a certain way, so body bias is going to get him in the NFL. And I don't know if he's even going to get a shot to play left tackle, even though I love that he's one of the better pass protectors we've seen when we're talking about some of these offensive tackle prospects in the 2024 draft, Croc. And he anchors really well. And it helps that he's not tall. He's 6'3" and 3/4 is what Troy Fautanu is. 317 pounds. He ran a 5:01 40-yard dash. I bet he was really mad that he didn't get under that 5:0, that 4.99 40-yard dash. And
if he did that, we're talking about Hall of Famer, right? Like that you break that 5 flat, it's like, okay.
It's big time. Yeah. I mean, Joe Staley was 4.79, which is like crazy. But any offensive lineman, when you're 300 pounds and you break 5 flat, I mean, that's crazy athleticism for an offensive lineman. But even more impressive than his 40-yard dash time was just seeing him at the combine move around in all those drills and how easy he moves. And you see that on tape as well. Balance, easy mover. He drops his hip very easily to anchor. He's rarely beaten, and he shows a little bit of nasty. He's not a mauler in the running game, but he'll pancake some guys from time to time in the running game. But I actually, with the way he's built and how everyone talked about how he's got to be an interior guy, I like him better as a pass blocker than a run blocker in a lot of cases. So to me, he plays more like a tackle. He just doesn't look like a tackle, but he does have 34.5-inch arm length, which I will take a guy who's 6'3 3/4 with 34.5-inch arm length before I'll take a guy who's 6'5 with 32-inch arms playing left tackle for my football team. So I think he has a chance to stick a tackle. I don't think he's going to get a chance to because of the body bias from NFL decision makers, but we'll see. I love the way he moves on pulls like he's a running back, and he'll find the hole and he hits it very easy. But the concerns, yeah, he's squatty. The number 55 doesn't help because that's kind of a center number anyway. And really not many weaknesses other than height. I think sometimes he kind of lunges and reaches a little bit too far. You'll see that in the run game, and he'll get over his skis a little bit. You'll see it in pass protection as well sometimes where he doesn't ride a rusher out long. He'll kind of start to reach for him a little bit. But very minor stuff. I didn't see him dominating though either, Croc. Like I didn't see him just burying guys left and right. I thought I was going to actually like his tape more with the way everyone talked about him. I liked it a lot, but I don't know if I'm, ready to just like be trading up and trying to draft him in the top 15.
And when we're talking about trading up, specifically our scenario was trading Brandon Ayuk, and obviously there's some, even with the DeForest Buckner trade, it wasn't DeForest Buckner straight up for Kinlaw. It was the money as well. So there is that element of it getting cheaper on the roster in certain spots. But if you were to trade Brandon Ayuk, hypothetically, and you draft a guy like Fautanu, you would say, oh man, like that's what you got for Ayuk, and you'd always compare those two guys. So that part would be interesting. You talked a little bit about him being a little bit more of a squattier offensive lineman. Some people might view him a little bit more as an interior guy. I thought he played very well as a guard tackle, but it did look a little bit more like a guard because of the number. As you were explaining that, Tristan Wirfs started coming to mind, where Tristan Wirfs had this conversation kind of surrounding him as well. Not that he was like a squatty guy, but actually built very similarly, I would say. But a lot of people thought he will go to the NFL and kind of translate into a guard position. And he's been a tackle, and he's been excellent at tackle. The Buccaneers are not upset that he's a tackle for them. So do you see maybe some similarities in how those two guys are viewed as prospects? What that might give somebody that wants Fautanu as a tackle, that might give them a little bit of hope.
Yeah, I think so. I think with Wirfs, he was just so much more explosive and so much more of a specimen and he was even taller than Fautanu was, even though he was built a little bit more square. So I don't know if that will help Fautanu or not. But I think his tape is the thing that helps him the most. And I like the way he plays tackle, and I don't think he's necessarily a guy. To be honest with you, I would say maybe even a better center than guard if we're trying to project him to a different position.
The toughest thing for me at tackle, in comparison to these other positions, I feel like, again, what I identified earlier with just his movement ability, he does move well, but he is a guy right away, at least in my opinion, that he moves better in a short area. So if he's a tackle and he has a guy right in front of him, I'm just more confident with that, as opposed to, okay, you're at guard or you're at center. And now we've seen what the 49ers ask of their guards and centers. They are guys that have to really move and pull. And I thought in space, not that he was bad at all, but it didn't pop. And I think maybe that's what Peacock's talking about. Peacock, if you're watching on YouTube right now, he'll be back in a second. But it didn't quite pop, just the overall athleticism and movement ability. So I wonder if he may be someone that fits more as a tackle for the 49ers as opposed to a guard, but maybe fits better at the guard position for another team that might be interested with him. Peacock, real quick, the last thing I said was, I wonder if he's someone that would fit better for the 49ers as a tackle as opposed to a guard, just specifically for the 49ers, because the 49ers, their guards and their centers as well, you mentioned that, they have to move so well in space. I mean, you are having to get across formations, you got to reach, but you have to do all these different things. I feel like you have to move in a straight line just a little better than he does, but his short area quickness and his short area movements are good. So do you think there's a chance he just is viewed better as a tackle for the 49ers as opposed to maybe another team that might view him more as a guard?
Yeah, it's interesting because he's so athletic and he moves so easily. But to be honest with you, I think he just fits everywhere. I think if he could play all 5 spots on the offensive line, I think he could play left tackle. For the 49ers, maybe they'd view him at one of the other spots, but I'd give him a shot. Like if he was drafted by the 49ers, and I think he's a late round 1 guy. I don't think he's going to get to where the 49ers are, but if he did get to 31, and I'm not going to be trying super hard to trade up for him, I don't think, because I maybe don't like him as much as some people do, even though he's really
not as nasty as Burton, right?
Right. And Barton's, I think, an easier guy to project inside, whereas Fautanu's an easier guy for me to say, stick him at tackle and make him prove that for some reason his height prevents him from playing tackle. And I don't think it does. Right. Next, let's talk Max Melton, cornerback out of Rutgers. We got Jer'Zhan Newton, defensive tackle from Illinois as well. Are they future 49ers? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book, Sweet 16 style now as well. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even guess who's going to win it all and cut down those nets in the tourney. And all you got to do is win that first $5 bet at FanDuel. And of course, tons of draft props as well. And you can still bet on the NFL futures. You can bet on Major League Baseball that's starting up this week and a whole lot more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Real quick with Troy Fautanu. First round all day long, early first round, late first round, where people are talking about him like he's just the best player in the draft. He's just a little bit short. I don't know if I saw that. I do like a first round guy there, but I think he's second half of the first round more so than a guy that is going to go top 10, top 15 all day as he's being talked about sometimes. I kind of said I felt the same way about Fuaga. I feel like people are getting a little too crazy about some of these guys. Like, they're really good and they're first round guys, and they probably should be off the board at some point by the 20s. But I don't think it should be shocking if they're within striking distance of the 49ers trading up 21, 22, 25, something like that.
Fuaga was someone who I was really high on. I don't think you were as high, but I'm like, oh, this is like top 10 type guy.
I'm getting higher on him because watching the other guys, I like Fuaga more. I like Fuaga more than Fautanu too. Yeah.
I think Fautanu, he fits right around where we had projected him in the trade up. Yeah. We trade up to 20 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You moved Brandon Ayuk out of there, and we drafted Fautanu, and it feels like he fit in that range. And I would like him. I see it in the chat. Someone said he'd be a day one starter for the 49ers. I agree.
Question about Fuaga, his arm length. Does he have the arm length to play tackle? We talked a little bit about that. I could see some teams liking him better at guard. His arms are actually shorter, even though he's much bigger than Fuaga. His arms are shorter, 33 and an eighth or something like that. It's not eliminating for me, just like the height is not eliminating for Fautanu to play tackle. He would have to prove that he fails at that, and either one of these guys might be, all pro guards, whereas they're just good tackles because they're missing a little bit of length or something like that. But I like the way Fuaga plays. He's a tackle all day for me, right tackle especially. Some teams might want a left tackle, and he only played right tackle in college, so maybe that's something to think about too for why he might not be a fit for every team. Max Melton, Croc, you are the cornerback expert. You're up first on Max Melton. What do the notes tell you about the Rutgers cornerback? 5'11", 187 pounds, ran 4.39 at the combine.
Really fast, and that explosiveness really kind of checks out on screen at different times. But I will say this. One thing that has been very consistent over the years since I've been watching cornerbacks and giving my opinion on them, the Big Ten is a little more difficult to truly evaluate guys, or at least for me to come away with this level of confidence that I'm spot on with, not spot on in the sense of being correct, but just 100% like sure what I'm seeing. I don't know if it's the corners. I don't know if it's the receivers. I don't know if it's the defenses or the offenses that they face, or maybe the quarterbacks not having like a ton of like just, draftable quarterbacks or a ton of these big time receivers in the conference. But it is hard to kind of evaluate these guys in the Big Ten. It's kind of specific to the Big Ten. And maybe it's because, when you think of Big Ten, you think of power football, running the rock. You think of Wisconsin, all the running backs they've had. You think of Michigan and how much over the years Harbaugh has run the ball there. And you have one team that throws the ball around a lot with Ohio State. So let's talk about Max Melton. And it was good to be able to dive into his film and see what he was right away. One of the things I noted was good motor. I really like to watch corners and see how they work when the play is away from them. What do they do when it's a run to the far side? Do they loaf? That's what we call it, right? Where a guy's just not sprinting to the ball. Or do they say, you know what? I'm going to try to figure out a way to just get in there somehow, some way, even if I don't quite get there. And he was definitely that guy. I was able to identify that right away. And it really showed up later in the game. It didn't stop Ohio State from scoring a touchdown, but they had a big run that they broke down the left sideline, and he takes off. He's way away from the play. I mean, he's on the back side of this play, and it maybe was like a 5-yard route that he got against him, and he took off. And he's the only person that was able to catch the ball carrier and tackle him before he scored. So just again, seeing that just relentlessness, that motor, that was something that checked out right away. You talked about his speed. He ran a 4.39. Part of his motor is having that speed and being able to catch guys. I thought he did a terrific job being able to run vertical with Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, they did move their cornerbacks a lot, around a lot. So I didn't get to just say, like, okay, what does he look like consistently against Marvin Harrison Jr.? You can go back years. I watched, C.J. Henderson against Jamar Chase. And it was C.J. Henderson on Jamar Chase wherever he went. You can go back and watch A.J. Terrell against Jamar Chase. It's A.J. Terrell on Jamar Chase for the most part wherever he goes, right? This was not the case there. And it almost was like a field boundary type thing they did with their cornerbacks. But I thought he motored out a lot. That's technique. You can fix that. The things that you can't really coach up or work on or fix is just his explosibility. You watch him on drag routes. Those are some of the things that really kill guys. A lot of NFL teams, they want to run those mesh routes and kind of get that cornerback picked off. Well, he did a really good job of really staying right there in that receiver's hip pocket and closing that gap. There was another time where Marvin Harrison Jr. early in the game ran a whip route, dove inside really hard, came back out, and Max Melton drove down on that. It maybe was a 3-yard gain on something where other guys get stuck in the ground, can't change direction, and it ends up being a bigger, run and catch opportunity, maybe a first down. So those were some things that checked out. Again, it was hard to really have more examples of certain things, even with other games that I put on. But overall, I liked him a lot. Did I feel like first round corner? Not quite when watching his film until I watched him in the Senior Bowl. I saw how scrappy he was. I saw how confident he was. I liked his toughness at the top of routes. And then when you watch him and they show some versatility, him playing nickel at the Senior Bowl. Didn't see a lot of that on this film, if at all, at least in the games that I watched. So you get to see him in a position. And everyone knows it's not just the 49ers. Me, I love positional versatility, and he showed that a lot as well. So that was something right there where I'm like, okay, 4-3-9, runs vertically with guys so he can play on the outside. Showing at the Senior Bowl he can play in the slot, and he's guarding guys one-on-one scrappy, maybe a flag here and there, but I like the aggressiveness. This is a guy that I really like.
Well, Croc liked Max Melton, I think, a little bit more than I thought he was going to. Usually he's a hater when it comes to ticky-tack. He's like technique here, there with the cornerbacks. My notes on Max Melton next. We're talking Jer'Zhan Newton as well, defensive tackle from Illinois. Both could be really good fits for your San Francisco 49ers in the 2024 NFL Draft. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by our very own Locked On Sports Today. Because if you're someone who is watching Fox Sports, ESPN, you name it, TV all day, right? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting, all the fake debate shows. How about you make the switch to Locked On Sports Today? A free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And yes, you'll see Croc and myself on there as well. Your team every day. All right, Croc. Max Melton, cornerback out of Rutgers, 4.39 speed. You see it at times. I did see one of the things with Max Melton that you do see with 4.3 guys sometimes. 4.3 corners, 4.3 wide receivers. And how can you run that fast? Well, you've got a certain stride to you, and you're somewhat of a leggy athlete. And I did see that at times with Max Melton. So there might be a limit to how sticky he's going to be as a man coverage guy in the NFL and breaking on footballs just because he's a little bit of a leggy athlete. That doesn't mean he's not going to be a really good player, but it's something that's going to keep him from being like, say, a first round draft pick. And maybe it's a top 50 draft pick in the NFL draft for most teams. He can get stuck in his break a little bit. I really want to see the agility times, which he didn't run at the combine, which can be somewhat telling, right? Sometimes. And, nickel outside versatility, love that. Competitive in coverage, as you mentioned, competitive in run support. You do see him sometimes line up in the nickel, and he's all about it. He shows speed and ball skills for that type of rotational cornerback that I think he would be very early in his career for the San Francisco 49ers. And when you look at what the 49ers have at cornerback right now, I think that's a perfect fit. Someone who could come in and play a little outside, play a little nickel. I think he'd probably play nickel early on in his career and allowed Deommodore Lenoir just to be the full-on starting cornerback on the other side.
Also, real quick, we got Rick Torres in the chat, and he says a lot of the mocks have Melton going in the third. Now, when we talk about the 49ers pick at 31, essentially that is, if you like this guy at 31, he's really, you could say first round, but we're kind of talking about second round players. Like you might only have 20 first round grades on players. So everybody else, you're kind of getting second and third round grades. 49ers, not sure where they're going to be, or they're going to be drafting late in the second round. So maybe you say, okay, we really like Max, but we don't like him quite at 31. Maybe someone else wants to get that fifth-year option on the player. Let's trade back into the second round and see if we can get him, if we have a similar grade on him as other people. That way you don't have to wait till pick 63 to see if he's there. So, yeah, it's not like I see a guy that's just this bona fide first-round guy. And it's like, oh, my goodness, how is he going to be there at 31? Like I like Kool-Aid McKinstry, right? Like Kool-Aid is like, if you said 31, take him, please, because that's a first-round corner to me. I didn't quite see that with this film. And I also didn't see him go up consistently against the same caliber players you see in the SEC.
Right. Late 2, early 3, though. So like basically a round later. He's a round later of Kool-Aid, right? Kool-Aid 5'11", 190. Is very similar. I think Kool-Aid's more technically sound corner, whereas Melton's got a little bit more speed and not quite as technically sound as Kool-Aid McKinstry. But I'd be fine with Max Melton at 64 for the 49ers. I'd really love him in the third round. How about the last guy on our list for today's show, Jer'Zhan Johnny Newton? Could the 49ers go defensive line in the NFL draft once again at pick 31? And I might be okay with it, Croc, if Johnny Newton is the guy who's there for him late. He's a stubby guy. He's short, 6'1", 6'1.5", 304 pounds. He did not test at the combine. I think he's dealing a little bit with an injury, so we don't know what the testing numbers are, but I don't need testing numbers to see how quick he is. He's kind of the defensive line version of Troy Fautanu, right, Croc? Where he's like a stubby guy. He's too short. He's going to get knocked because he's short. But to be honest with you, Croc, I love the tape. I saw a first-round guy all day. He is a quick twitch interior defensive lineman. And while he's short, he's still 304 pounds. It's not like, remember Aaron Donald came out. And by the way, did you hear Aaron Donald was playing at like 255, 265, he said? Yeah. I mean, that's insane. And he was like, 285 or something like that when he came out in the draft. Johnny Newton, Johnny is what he's called sometimes. Johnny Newton, 6'1" and 5'8", 304 pounds. He's so active. His hands are nonstop. He wins with quicks. He wins with effort and hand usage. And despite his size, he doesn't get overwhelmed as a run defender either on the inside. So he's short, not necessarily undersized, I think is a good way to put it for him. And he always got power in his upper body and his lower body. And that helps him consistently win the leverage battle as well. And he's so short that it helps him win the leverage battle even when he plays a little high, because sometimes he does play, I think, a little bit high. But he does have short arms as well. And it does show up at times, Croc. And I see it more so not hand fighting with offensive linemen, but I see it as a tackler. He's a little short armed. He even actually got stiff armed by the Kansas running back, stiff armed him to the ground because he couldn't get his hands on him. But he had chased the Kansas running back all the way to the sideline. So it showed his range and his hustle too. Oh,
my notes, you can't see it, but the very last note, got stiff armed to the ground versus Kansas.
Yeah, there you go. See? Yeah. I love the Johnny Newton film. He won all the time. He was disruptive. He was nonstop. I love the motor, and I think he's a really good player. Really disruptive interior 3-tech that I think would be a fantastic pick at pick 31.
Yep, looks like an NFL 3-tech. That's one of my notes. My very first note: good pass rusher. I thought he had a really good motor, but that motor, again, I like that you talked about Fautanu because I see exactly what you're saying when a guy who has initial quickness, really good burst right now, and he has some straight line speed as well. Don't ask him to change direction. Not a guy that can do that. Once he's moving in one direction, he's going in that direction. Mm-hmm. I saw times where he won a pass rep immediately. Hands, swipe down. He's in the backfield. Quarterback just kind of moves, and he's like, I can't quite change direction and stop. So I'm not expecting him to be that guy. Once he gets those 304 pounds moving in one direction, it's going in that direction. But the quickness, the initial ability to beat guys in the pass was definitely there. I did have questions on how stout he was versus the run. I thought he got a little high, not just in the run, but versus any kind of run or like doubles. Any kind of double teams, got very high in that. Had some trouble if he does not win on his initial move. Now, his initial pass rush moves, I felt like were really good. And you'd see something, he just wins right now. But if he did not win just right now, I saw a couple speed to power plays, and it looked really good, but it was very few and far in between. And again, that's probably why we're talking about him being more of a pick 31 guy potentially, as opposed to a guy that's going, top 10, top 15, because he has everybody wants the pass rushers, and he is that. But then there's some of the lacking a little bit in other areas.
It's funny. There's times where, because he has this leverage and he's 304 pounds. There was times when you saw him pushing against a bigger guard, and he wasn't pushing the pocket. He wasn't pushing him anywhere. And so he's not going to be a 2-gap sort of a guy. And he wins with that initial quickness. You're right. And there's times, and I think short arms is a part of it as well. Once he does not win with that initial hand fight, with those initial quicks, then guys can get their hands on him and they can control him a little bit. But overall, he's a really good player and a fun player to watch. And I can see why people have him going in the late first round. And I've seen him mocked to the San Francisco 49ers at pick 31. And this isn't a very good. There's been a lot of not very good defensive tackle classes recently. I'm not sure he gets to the Niners because I don't know how many defensive tackles are better than him in this class. Like maybe one guy. So he's a top 2 defensive tackle probably in this class. And so if someone wants to tackle, he might even be gone before 31. My question to you, Croc, to finish this up. We've talked a lot about offensive linemen at 31 for the 49ers. And there's a lot of guys that have, they're missing one thing here or there. Maybe this guy's got to be a guard. Maybe this guy's not quite athletic enough. Would you rather take someone like Johnny Newton, defensive tackle at 31, than one of these offensive linemen that kind of all have a little something, which is the reason why they're late first round picks and not middle first round picks? Because if it's like Mims, give me Mims. If it's like Fuaga, easy pick, run the card to the podium if it's Fuaga, right? But some of these other guys, they were like, early second round, late first round guys, maybe he's a guard. I don't know. Give me Johnny Newton, I think.
Again, and I'm glad you said Mims, because I wanted to cut you off and be like, if Mims is there, I'm probably taking him because he has a ton of upside. But again, he's missing the actual experience. He's only started 8 games in college. He's had some injuries and durability things. So he's a guy that has tremendous upside, but he could potentially slide to pick 31. Is he a Kyle Shanahan type guy? And I'm talking about just movement, skills, and ability. He feels like he has some kind of freakish ability, but how much is Kyle Shanahan gonna like him? I don't know. Really massive offensive lineman, but if not, I kind of like what you're thinking here with Johnny Newton, because Johnny is a guy who, on that defensive line, who do the 49ers have that's going to be around for the next however many years? They did go and get some interior guys. How long is Malik Collins going to be around?
Yeah, they're all the moves they made on the defensive line in free agency are short-term moves.
Yeah. So that's something that is okay. Obviously, this isn't a huge need, but for a team that's going to consistently picking more like picking late in the first rounds, you have an opportunity to get a guy like this that quote unquote falls to you. Maybe because it's not, maybe it doesn't because it's not a big or deep defensive tackle class, but I would kind of address that and have some long-term solutions to that position next to Hargraves, who you paid a lot of money to.
All right. More prospects to come. We're putting together our big board, and then we're really starting to stack it now with a whole bunch of players and getting a really good idea of this 2024 NFL draft class, which players we like for the San Francisco 49ers at 31, at 64, and beyond. So stay tuned here to Locked On 49ers every day, and we'll have it covered for you, all the latest news as well. We appreciate the everydayers. Appreciate everybody jumping in on our live episodes as well. And of course, Croc and I will be back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.